That's better. Hello. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the WP Quickies series, bite-sized WordPress tips and tricks in 30 minutes or less. Hi, I'm Will Brown, WordPress consultant and educator. I help WordPress developers and designers get more clients and increase their monthly revenue to build a sustainable and profitable WordPress business. Now, one of the common questions that I get asked is, can WordPress handle heavy traffic? Or to put it another way, can WordPress scale for high volume traffic? The quick answer is yes, and today we're going to find out just how we're going to do that. But first, before we start, make sure that you hit the subscribe button, ding the bell if you're on YouTube, get my latest video updates. Connect with me on LinkedIn as well. You can join our Facebook group, which is WordPress Sydney Meetup, and you can ask questions online there if you don't want to ask them in the comments right during this live one. You can also visit wpaustralia.org and see all the WordPress meetups that are happening across Australia at the moment, and also join our Slack group. There we go. If you're a web developer or designer who creates or maintains client websites, I have the ultimate website owner survival guide, which will help you add some recurring revenue to your business. So visit wasg.com.au. We have the in-person monthly WordPress Sydney meetup. It's back on. Again, it's in-person meetups the last Monday of every month at 6 p.m. We're at the Microsoft Reactor, which is just next to Wynyard Station in the Sydney CBD. You can visit meetup.com/WordPress-Sydney for more information, but I'm going to be talking about compliance and WooCommerce. So if you're running a WooCommerce site or even just a business site, I'm going to go through 3 or 4 of the big compliance rules and regulations that you really must comply with. So come along in person, chat with me, have some pizza as well. That's good. So that's in August the 29th, Microsoft Reactor next to Wynyard Station, and that's at 6 p.m. start. And I'm always looking for suggestions for these WP Quickies. So you can scan that QR code later on when you're watching back the video, or I've dropped the link in the comments below. So please give me some topics that I can queue up later on in the year. If there's anything like really cool, I might swap some existing ones that I've got there just now. So let me know. That'd be great. We've got some people online just now. We've got Mr. Miarpius. We've got Dean. Hi, Dean. Long time no speak. We've got Jean from the sunny Central Coast. It is sunny in Sydney just now, which we're very thankful for. We've got John as well online. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me on this sunny Sydney afternoon. Okay, so let's get into today's WP Quickies. Rolling up my sleeves. There we go. Must mean business. A common question that I get asked a lot is this, can WordPress really scale to heavy traffic? Because a lot of people still have this illusion that WordPress is just this little small blog that people type posts on every so often, and that's it. But the reality is that WordPress is used in almost 40% of all the top 100 million websites, and that includes some of the big heavy players and organizations. So let's have a quick look. And I'll just remove myself there. There you go, full screen. So let's start with some examples of enterprise organizations that use WordPress. So top of the list here I've put is the White House. Obviously, that's in America, the White House, the current government. They did take a little bit of a step back from WordPress when we had the previous administration, but we're back on WordPress at the moment. So if you visit whitehouse.gov, then you will see, if you look at the source code, that is running WordPress quite nicely and really fast. Obviously, they get a huge amount of traffic, from the US population and others, and it ticks along quite nicely for that. Another example of an enterprise organization a little bit closer to home is News Corp Australia. Now, News Corp, one of the biggest media groups here in Australia, they moved over to WordPress probably about 4 or 5 years ago. So a lot of their websites that they use are now running WordPress on the front end for those. So you can visit any of their publishing venues, and you will see that WordPress sits there in the front. Now, the technology behind that is pretty cool. I'll maybe go into that maybe in another WP Quickies. But again, they decide to move to WordPress because they can see the value, of the editorial aspect, the support, the community, and everything like that. So a huge, huge organization here in Australia that runs WordPress front up on their websites. Some others are USA Today, this particularly the sports media. They run all that sort of stuff through WordPress. The New York Post, which is one of the big tabloids publications in America. And then we've got a couple of ones that you might not know, you might not have heard of, but one called Capgemini. They are a big IT consultant firm for them. Then PMC, or Pence Media Corporation. They are a big massive digital marketing and print brand company. So they cover things like publications like Variety and Rolling Stone magazine, with the complementary websites, which is run on WordPress. Then you've got a big, the Kaiser Family Foundation, or kind of known as KFF, because they're not really a foundation anymore. Anyway, they're a not-for-profit company or charity in the healthcare space, and they are massive, and they've got quite a few WordPress websites that they run over the different kind of organizations and departments and stuff that they cover. Then we've got two last ones: Nginx, which is the Russian web server that runs, the majority of the web servers on the internet at the moment. And then, of course, closer to the WordPress sphere is WordPress.com. So WordPress.com has millions and millions of websites, mostly blog, but they do have some e-commerce stuff as well. But that if anyone ever asks you about WordPress on the enterprise, you can always just refer to WordPress.com. It's got millions and millions of websites, so it scales nicely for the users there. Now, these organizations, they operate on an enterprise level with traffic in the millions every hour, or tens of millions every day. So we're not just talking a couple of hundred, we're talking millions and millions per hour. And WordPress powers them all. That's certainly those examples there. So if your client, if their client asks, if WordPress can handle large volumes of traffic, you can quite confidently say yes and point to one of these examples. Okay, so let's have a look at a typical small business WordPress website setup. It might be yours. Web traffic, in this case, passes through your web host's physical caching systems. Most website hosts, they're going to have some sort of server level caching, that tries to feed off information before it hits the server. It just makes common sense. But in that case, if it's a new user, then it goes all the way through and it hits the physical server that your website is being hosted in. For those now, this physical server, it's got a limited shared RAM, CPU, input, output, and disks running, and that's a shared resource for that physical server, and that's spread across all the different web servers, and databases that are running on that particular machine. And it could be a virtual server, but at the end of the day, it's still a physical server there, in a rack, in a data center for that. So it's got finite RAM, CPU, IO, and disk that it's got available too. Now, this is a fine setup for consistent, moderate website traffic, and you can fine tune your RAM, CPU, IO, and disk to accommodate small traffic fluctuations for that. Now, this is called scaling up and scaling down. So it's adding more CPU, more RAM, etc., to the physical server or a virtual server when you've got more or less demand. So that's what we call scaling up and scaling down. So we're adding RAM, we're adding CPU for that. And again, as I say, that can handle small scale fluctuations in traffic. Not too bad. But let's have a look at high traffic enterprise volume and see where this particular solution kind of breaks down and what we can do to fix that. Okay, so what's the problem with the high traffic to your website? So when you get a spike of high traffic to your website, suddenly all the server resources such as RAM and CPU and bandwidth, input, output, all that sort of stuff, they are pushed to their maximum limits, where you can no longer add more to the physical server. You're stuffed. You can't scale up, anymore. So when incoming requests are outstripped or outstripping the capacity of your website for the process for them, this is called bottlenecking. So when you've got more stuff than the server can actually process, you're trying to squeeze all this traffic into a space that is unable to scale to that demand. The system has reached its maximum capacity and things start to become unresponsive, or even worse, they crash. And of course, that's going to lead to a downtime in your website, and it's going to lead to a downtime in your business and your profits at the end of the day. So if your site is handling consistent enterprise level traffic, or you know that your traffic is going to spike, maybe during seasonal changes, or maybe during marketing campaigns or viral marketing campaigns, then you're going to need to have a scalable solution. This is what we're talking about today. Can WordPress scale to meet that sort of traffic demand? Okay, I'm going to get rid of myself here so you can have a look at that. Now, here is an example of a scalable WordPress architecture that can handle high traffic and high traffic spikes. This particular solution is based on Amazon AWS, but it could be any cloud solution like Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, or a branded managed WordPress host like Kinetics, WP Engine, Kinsta, Wordify, etc., etc., etc. So let me explain a little bit about how this architecture works and scales. Now, this is an extreme example. I like doing extreme examples. So this is like everything implemented for total scaling. But you could just implement partial bits of this, to help with scaling. But let's have a look at how this works altogether. So in this example, at the front is Amazon Route 53. Now, this is a service which handles routing, traffic routing, IP address routing through to one or more load balancers. And the job of a load balancer is to distribute traffic evenly to two or more web servers. So it has a look to see which one has got the highest capacity, and then it transfers the traffic to the one with the lower capacity. So it tries to even out, hence the word load balancer, the traffic to these two website instances. So in this case, we have a single EC2, that's just a web server instance. That's Amazon AWS Talk EC2. And it's called an auto-scaling web instance, which will automatically add additional CPU, RAM, input, output, disks, stuff, according to the demand, according to the traffic demand. And if the demand reaches the maximum resources for that EC2 web server, because it's just a virtual instance, it's going to spin up another EC2 web server instance. And then the load balancer itself is going to start to send traffic to that resource to balance the load of the traffic. And this is going to keep happening. The more traffic comes in, the more it's going to spin up more web servers, and the more that the load balancer is going to send traffic to whatever servers have the minimum resource to try and balance that load. And the end result of that is your website's going to be up all the time as your traffic increases. So that's from the web server point of view, but that's not all that's happening here. So WordPress obviously needs a database. And in this case, in this example, we have an Amazon RDS database, which can also auto scale. So typically in this example, you can have a master database with multiple slave instances. And this is all overseen with Amazon architecture, something called Amazon CloudWatch, that has a look at the demand in the back end. Then it's going to spin up more database slave instances, which are just copies of the master. So the master database is one that gets updated, and then it replicates out to the slaves, and then each of the website servers can then be allocated to a different copy. So we're scaling up the web servers, we're scaling up the databases as well for that. So that's how you can handle the back-end database traffic as well, because WordPress obviously communicates with database quite a bit because all your content is in there. So we've got scalable web servers, we've got scalable databases in the back end. But that's not all that's happening here. So if you have a look at the top, those are the two little red things. The one that looks like a bucket in there. In this case, in this particular example, the media assets, so all the images, your video, your audio, all the stuff, that you'd with static assets for the website, they are handled separately. So they're handled away from the web server. They're handled away from the database. And in this case, they're served using Amazon S3 and the CloudFront service, which will scale the resources needed when the web server asks it for. So, we've got three separate services. We've got the file systems service that's scaling because it uses S3, it uses CloudFront to scale that service to send more stuff as needed. We've got the web server scaling to meet demand, so spinning up new web servers. And then we've got the database creating more copies in the back end, so it can allocate one of those to each of the web server instances so that the main database itself is not getting overloaded. And this is all happening automatically in the back end. As far as people, as far as your traffic to your website is concerned, they're just seeing your website. It's responding quickly because they're being sent to a separate server, web server, which has got its own separate server database, which is coming, and all the information is coming back. All the assets are being channeled through S3, which is scaling as well. So as far as your end users are concerned, they're getting the exact same experience, but times that by 10 million people hitting your website every day or every hour. So each part of this solution can be scaled on demand. We've got your IP routing, we've got our load balancers, and again, load balancers, they can scale as well. You can have a load balancer manager. You can spin up multiple load balancers for those. That's quite easy to do. We've got multiple web servers that can scale, and we've got multiple databases that can scale, and we've got the file system as well that can scale to handle enterprise level. So each part of this particular diagram can be scalable for enterprise level traffic. And this particular system is called an elastic scaling solution because your resources are being stretched out to increase the width of that bottleneck that we talked about before, letting more traffic into your system. So this is something you can't do when you're scaling up because you've still got that single instance. You're adding RAM, CPU, more bandwidth, but you're going to reach a physical limit. So at some point, you're going to probably need to scale out to widen that bottleneck so that more traffic can come through. And this is one of the examples of how you can do it. And all you really need is the money or credit card to pay for it. Because obviously it's a costly solution, but if you're getting tens of millions of websites hits every day, then you're probably making a substantial bit of money from that traffic. And again, this is just one example of a scalable WordPress solution. And your managed WordPress hosting systems like Kinetics, like WP Engine, like Kinsta, like Wordify, all these particular systems, they're going to employ a similar architecture in their backend systems that you're probably going to be unaware of because they package it and brand it and bundle it as a premium monthly or yearly priced solution. But you can guarantee that these companies have something similar to this system. It's probably built on one of the big three systems. So like Amazon, AWS, or Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure. But it's more custom to them for those. But this is the type of architecture that they would have, in their systems, just to kind of scale the WordPress systems for high traffic. Okay, so we've had just a few slides today. I didn't want to go over the top, so kind of throwing a bit of technical stuff at you today, or maybe a little bit of stuff that you didn't realize, you haven't heard of before, like load balancers and instances and database copies and things. But if you are interested at all about how you would scale WordPress, or if you're trying to explain to clients how that could happen, or if you have a client that comes on board, that's looking to implement a high-scaled WordPress system, and they're not kind of sure if that's going to happen, then you can grab this sort of resources and show them, look, it does scale to that particular enterprise level. So scaling WordPress for heavy traffic, large scale traffic is a reality that enterprise organizations are already using today. But there's also stuff that you can do. There's software coding that you can optimize. There's software caching, so transients or WordPress plugins and transients. There's design considerations as well that you can employ, so decrease the amount of stuff, amount of HTML elements that you have in your page designs. All this sort of stuff that you can do, that you can employ to decrease the size of your pages and limit the database and external APIs requests. And all that's going to do is increase your speed and responsiveness of your website, which again is going to help serve more traffic quicker, faster for that. So you can throw hardware at it, yes, but you can also do some stuff, from a designer or developer or a WordPress admin point of view. That's also going to help to increase, the responsiveness that WordPress is going to serve to your traffic. And another benefit of this is you're probably likely going to see an increase in search engine results as well, as you increase the speed and usability of your website. There's nothing worse than Google having a look at your website. You've got high traffic, but the responsiveness is not good. It's pretty slow, and then the Google Core Web Vitals, it's going to start measuring that sort of stuff. So if you've got 1,000 people hitting your website, that's great because you've got an extra 1,000 people. But if your website starts to slow down, that's going to suck, and Google's going to notice that. So, being able to scale, being able to implement all this sort of stuff, it is important when you reach that particular level in your business. Okay, so that's all I have for today about WordPress and scaling and enterprise stuff. If you've got any questions about that, you can ask away. There's one down here just now. Let me just get it up online. Okay, we have a question that says, I've got sites on Cloudways with the Cloudflare free platform. Would I get any advantage from any other caching add-ins? Yes, I mean, if you're implementing perhaps load balancing for that, you're always going to have the CDN, so Cloudflare CDN is going to help, because when people hits that, it will bounce back. But not for all traffic, not for all websites. If we're talking about scaling of traffic to this particular huge level, then you're going to get people coming through, and it's going to hit the web hosting app for those. So you could implement load balancing with multiple web servers, and that's going to help increase the responsiveness of your website. Or you could do simple things like offloading all your media to the file system, for that, which I think is what you've got just now, Cloudways, for that. But yeah, it all depends on scale, because at some point you don't want this single bottleneck, which could be your Cloudflare. Unless you're paying for the Cloudflare, it's going to have a particular capacity, which then once that's done, it's going to start feeding information through to your web host. So you have to think about all these steps in the architecture. So yeah, great question. Dean has, apart from paying to scale up, what would I need to do to the configuration file, or are they all automatic? Great question, Dean. If you're thinking about WordPress specifically, if you're trying to implement this at a lower level, so rather than throw it all on Amazon AWS or Google or Azure, then you would add things like HyperDB. HyperDB allows you to manage multiple database instances. For example, you can allocate one to be a master and then other ones to slave. So there's that particular thing. And in that instance, then WordPress or that plugin will add stuff to your htaccess, for example, to redirect requests to the different database servers. So that's kind of a small thing that you could do to implement that in the back end. Follows. But in general, when you're looking for these big systems, these big architectures like AWS, the services that they employ, like CloudFront, Cloudways, and all the different watching systems, they are pretty much automatic. They're services that look at a more abstract server level rather than just WordPress. WordPress is kind of consolidated down to an instance. It's like an app. So it's treated like an app rather than a system in itself. So that's the way that these systems handle. So WordPress is an app, and the app is then given access to a database, and the AWS management functions. It looks after the configuration and the routing, and the connection between all that other stuff. So when you're looking at like an enterprise level, there's not so much tweaking within the WordPress configuration file. It's more a kind of more hardware or systems level architecture point. That's when it's doing it. That's great. Thank you for those questions. Really good questions as well. And thanks for your time. So there's my contact information. You can get in contact with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. I've got a new website, willbrown.com. Please visit that and have a look for there. I've got some courses and some good stuff about running WordPress business queued up for that over the next few months. And for next week, I am going to be talking about WordPress hooks, actions, and filters. So if you're a developer, if you're looking to get into development, you kind of need to know this stuff. You need to know how WordPress hooks and actions filters work. If you're not a WordPress developer, that's okay. I'm not going to go in depth. It's going to be a high-level overview of how WordPress works and how these actions and filters can help you expand and your WordPress and cook into the system and really kind of extend WordPress from the core. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, please join me next week on WP Quickies. But thank you very much, guys. Take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye.